as a younger guy, something that, you know, I hear or I've been told quite a lot by older men and older people that I talk to is, you know, as a man, you know, you can take your time. You don't need to rush things. You know, men generally hit their peak. And when they say peak, I guess, you know, in terms of the way you're viewed and valued, a lot later compared to women. And when I say peak, let's not, well, I'm not using the red pill kind of phrasing of it, but financially, physically, attractiveness, all the kind of signalers that you would kind of be displaying to the opposite sex in their mid to late 30s. Whereas for women, obviously, and this doesn't diminish their value, but for women, their peak in terms of physical is obviously in their mid 20s to late 20s, right? And because of that, and obviously also there's other things like when they can give birth and so on and so forth. Because of that, you know, there is a lot of conversation around two things. Older men who date younger women, women with children, like single mums, like their dating prospects, but also women in their 40s and 50s trying to date, which then led me, well, didn't lead me. This video popped up on my feed, which is what we're going to talk about today. So let's just get straight into it. I don't want to waste no time.
Is there anyone else out there in their 40s like me who feels kind of invisible? Like, I'm not as cute as I was in my 20s and 30s. I'm definitely not as fit as I was in my 20s and 30s. I don't have as much hair as I used to have. It's literally falling off like the top of my head.
You do become a little more invisible the older you get as a woman. Unfortunately, I don't get asked out on a lot of dates. I never get asked out on dates. I don't know if it's being 55 in Los Angeles or if it's just a strange town.
What is the biggest confidence killer for women over 50? Men over 50. They never look at you anymore.
When I was 55, I felt like I was starting to fade. I felt like I was starting to go invisible. I felt dismissed. I felt ignored. I felt like I was washed up.
When I was 15, I started modeling, and it was a very hard thing to walk away from. Then around the age of 45, I started noticing that the way I was perceived was slightly different than what I had become used to. And then I would put photos of myself in bikinis. All of a sudden, I started getting the influx of, "Are you a little desperate there, Grandma? How about you cover up and spare us the look of your poor aging body?" I was sort of getting relinquished to the invisible women category.
All right. This must be a red pill video because someone's got, shout out to Bill Belichick. I believe he's an American football coach who's dating a lady like 20 or 30 years younger than him. I'm not too clued up on American basketball, American football. Anyway, interesting video. The reason that is interesting is because I feel like when it comes to dating, for men and women, they seem to have a very different experience after the age of 40, because a lot of these guys at 40 and 50, they usually, if they focus on themselves and they've done the right things, they're usually in a stronger financial position. You know, all the years of investing in yourself and, you know, stacking your money. Maybe you've got a house or two, you know, you've got different income streams. You've positioned yourself as an expert in whatever you do for work. You're probably in a steady place. If you haven't obviously got that partner at that stage and you are a single guy, you are in a strong position just as a person, because what do people look for? There's a great book and I really recommend everybody read it. It's called The Evolution of Desire by, I think his name's David Buss. I just read it like a couple of weeks ago. Evolution of Desire. Let me just make sure I want to get this right. It is by, David Buss. And he speaks about this in the book, right? In the book, he basically covers all of these different like meta studies, crazy amount of studies and research. And what he found is that there are some things that have just been a part of human beings for millennia, like it's been forever, where men tend to look for certain body types. We've always gravitated to certain aspects of women, such as, you know, if they're youthful, we know that would draw a man to her because he wants to procreate. These little things, right, that are just innate within human biology and the way that we think and the way that we're wired. As much as we think that, you know, we are gods and we're trying to do all this crazy stuff to the world, like there is a bit of nature to us. We are animals at the end of the day. So it's interesting because a lot of these women, what are they saying? That, you know, they hit 40 and they're being seen less. No one's looking at them. And I don't think that's always the case. Obviously, if you're 40, you look after yourself, you can still be attractive to a lot of people. There's a lot of younger men that date older women. So it's not that, oh, it's completely finished. But, you know, when is a woman at her peak physically? Not like her peak as a human being, but physically is probably mid 20s, 22, 23, maybe all the way up to like 30. Then after 30, they're still in their peak, I think 31, 32. And then obviously after 35, I believe that, I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm not going to say it, but let me just Google this. Right? I'm right here, right? Chances, oh no, fertility rates after 30, after 35. Let's go after 35. Because I know that after 35, pretty much your chance of having children kind of decrease quite a lot. So here we go. The decrease in the chance of pregnancy after the age of 35 is gradual and more like a slope than a cliff, at least until age 40. A large study that followed women trying for a baby found the chance of pregnancy after 12 months was 87% for women aged between 30 to 31. This dropped to 76 at age 36 to 37, and then 54 at age 40 to 41. So it's still possible. It's not like, oh, it's game over. But also there's physical things that take place as well. As you age, more wrinkles, different body parts start to look different, etc., etc. You get my point. So the point I'm trying to make here is that for men who are, you know, we got the wandering eye, and if we're trying to select a partner, especially if you're older, and also have to factor in older men in their 40s and 50s who don't have kids yet and want to have kids, they're going to be weighing up all of these things. And if they have the financial resources, they've got to think, who am I going to allocate these resources to? There's so much more thinking to do. So if you're an older guy, you're probably not going to date an older woman if you don't have to, and if you have the access and the ability to attract younger women. On the flip side, though, there are some younger women that will not date older men. I think it's more likely to happen. So again, that puts men in a stronger position. It's more likely to happen. But there are a lot of women that would be like, oh, she's in her 20s, she wouldn't date a guy in his 40s or whatever. Although I would say it's more, that happens more than the other way around. It happens more than a 20-year-old guy dating a 40 or 50-year-old woman, when he can date women his own age that probably look better 9 times out of 10, because we're all human. We all age, we all get old, we get grey hair, we get wrinkles, you know, we get wrinkles are there, we get, our skin gets bad as we age. Like it's just, we're humans. We're not robots. We can't last forever. So it's interesting, and it is kind of sad, because what happens to all these women that are in their 40s and 50s? Are they just destined to be alone forever? You know, their dating chances are just thin air, disappears completely. Like what can they do? What do they do? How do they overcome this so that they can still be not desirable, but they can still be in the market and have some success in regards to relationships and dating? I don't know, but I think it's quite interesting what some of these women are going through, because what does it feel like to be invisible? I think, and here's the last part, and I probably should have said this earlier. I might edit this to be in an earlier section. But what women experience in their 40s and 50s of being invisible is probably what most young men experience in their like late teens to really early 20s. That invisible factor. Now, luckily for me, I've never had that. But I know there's a lot of guys who they have felt invisible because maybe they ain't got the money, they ain't got the looks, and that's because at that age, you know, you don't have, the likelihood is you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of assets, you don't have a lot of material things to be able to flaunt and show people and signal attraction. So a lot of these 18-year-olds, 19-year-old, 20-year-old men and boys can feel invisible to women, because the girls in their 20s, early 20s, and even late teenagers, they're probably looking at the older guys who've already got the resources. So if they are invisible and then they haven't got the cues, they haven't managed to build up something to signal to women and be more attractive, how do I describe this? Yeah, they become invisible, right? Because they're invisible to the women that they want. So now this same thing happens to women, but in their 40s and 50s, which is quite funny, because they go through this whole life where they are super desirable, everyone wants them, they hit 40 and 50, less eyeballs. I would guess not all of them are invisible. If you're good looking, people will still come to you, but they're invisible. Whereas boys, generally, this is a generalization, because obviously if you know, when I was 18, I probably is doing more than I am now, but that's another story. But there's a big section of boys from 18 to 22, I guess, who are technically, to a lot of people, invisible, right? but then they hopefully get to mid 30s, late 40s, mid 40s, and they've built up that capital, that social capital, that mental capital as well, because that mental maturity, physically, hopefully they've got themselves to a good place where they're keeping their body in shape. And then obviously finances, because whether we like it or not, finances are very, very important in dating, right? At least that's what I think. Anyway, interesting.